But yes, if we can successfully move you from, say, New York or California to Texas or Florida or another state that has zero tax, and I'm not talking just a paper move, I'm talking a real move, change your driver's license, your primary residence, your voter registration, your electricity bill, your gym membership, all these, 101 subjective ties. If we start moving those over, we cut them from New York, we move you down to Florida, we get you accepted as a tax resident there. Then we move you overseas. Then we can make sure that we're not going to be owing state taxes. Because there are stories of people going from specifically California. California is the most aggressive with this, but going directly from California to overseas, we can take care of the federal tax with a couple of other different programs directly from the IRS, but the state tax can still follow you.
Welcome to the Build It to Billions podcast, where we guide successful entrepreneurs and investors on their journey from millions to billions. We believe that the key to scaling and compounding your wealth and life starts every single day with the mindset and practice of stewardship of ownership and applying billionaire biblical principles. Our ultimate goal is to help you scale and compound your wealth and life so you can give more all of it away to help MVPs, the most vulnerable people. My name is Brett Swartz, and each episode we're joined by the top entrepreneurs, millionaires and billionaires who share their secrets, wisdom, and insights with us so we can all level up and make a bigger impact. I'm excited about our next guest. He is originally from a place in Canada. He'll tell you about that. But he has expatmoney.com, and we're going to talk about some taxes, living tax-free abroad, and some cool things about, becoming an expatriate, what that all looks like. And overall, we're going to dive into some neat stuff. This guest is the world's most sought after expert and expat consultant. He focuses on high net worth private clients to legally mitigate tax liabilities, obtain a secondary residence and citizenship, and assemble a portfolio of foreign investments, including international real estate and so much more. Please welcome to the show with me, Mr. Mikkel Thorup. Mikkel, how you doing?
I'm very well, Brett. Thank you very much. Excited about today's conversation. Should be a good one, and hopefully inform and inspire your audience a little bit. Should be good.
Excellent. Love it. For our listeners, get to know you for the first time, would you give us just a little bit more about your story and your current focus?
Yeah. So as you mentioned, I'm Canadian citizen, born and raised, left in 2000, been living overseas for 25 years straight now, lived in 9 different countries, circumnavigated the globe over 400 times, visited about 120 countries, own real estate in about a dozen different countries, and I kind of do this work on the professional, the hobby, and the family level. So I'm kind of really in the thick of this for the last 2+ decades, and more than anything, I hope you guys get from today that I'm still super passionate about these things, and I still really love talking about them, and I'm excited to talk to you about them today, Brett.
Amazing. Let's dive right into it. What's the number one secret when it comes to living tax-free abroad, and then basically using every means necessary to legal means necessary to be able to grow your wealth in a tax-efficient way?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the first thing that people need to understand is that not all countries tax the same way. There's actually many different tax systems around the world. And just because we are born in one country and, we're born into a certain set of laws, don't necessarily mean that that we need to follow those forever. Now, if you're an American and we're talking taxes, there can be some tricky parts because Americans tax actually based on citizenship, not just residency. So I guess that would be the first thing that people would need to understand. There's 2 countries in the world that tax on citizenship. One is Eritrea, which is a small African country, which is known for blatant human rights violations. And the second is the United States. Every other country in the world taxes in a different manner, usually if you are a tax resident. So if you're deriving your income from there, or you're living there, you're spending a certain amount of time in that country, then you will be a tax resident, will owe taxes there. But for the Americans, you can move overseas, you can live in another country, you can not go back to the United States for a dozen years, and you still owe a tax return and taxes on your worldwide income every single year. So that's kind of where we have to start, define the problem, let's say, and then we can kind of go from there.
Yeah, it does seem like the America is like the IRS of the world, right? Where they they tend to be in a lot of places all at once, and especially if you're an American citizen and you go somewhere else. And so what's the truth to that, or is there any myths in that, or what, what can you expand upon that?
Yes, I mean, so there are a number of strategies we can still use for Americans when going overseas. The main thing that I want people, to understand is if you're an American, that you do have to file and you may owe taxes on your worldwide income no matter where you live. So it's not like one of these things, you see in movies. It's like, oh, they just structured the things offshore and there's no taxes, or they put it in an offshore bank account and there's no taxes, or, some numbered account in Switzerland. It's like all of that stuff is long gone. Right now, you have a legal responsibility to report and file taxes on your worldwide income. And we absolutely follow all of the laws, whether we like the laws or we don't like the laws, we follow them. Because, our organization, it's all about having more freedom. And you start breaking the laws, you don't end up having more freedom. You end up having a lot less freedom.
Let's break that down, right? Yeah, I think that's really helpful. And by the way, if you want to learn more about Mikkel Thorup, you can go to expatmoney.com. It's expatmoney.com. So, Mikkel, I've heard this strategy. Tell me what you think. Let's say you lived in New York, you lived in California, you lived in New Jersey your whole life, and you're thinking about moving overseas, right? And you're like, you know what? I like to move overseas, but I know that I will be taxed based upon the previous, residency that I was in. Maybe I stop for a year or two and establish my primary residency in a Florida or a Puerto Rico, and I establish it there. And, maybe do a 1 year vacation, if you will, right? And buy a house and get my mail, get my bank accounts, get everything set up. And, maybe I live there for 2 years, maybe just a year though, right? At least a tax return or two or something. And then I move overseas to another location. And per the U.S. legal tax code system, am I correct in saying that my taxes are no longer necessarily tied to the New York or the New Jersey, California, but it would tied to my last primary residency? Is that true?
Yes and no. So let's slow it down a little bit. So what we're specifically referring to is state income tax. Now, the federal tax is a different piece of the puzzle, and we'll need to deal with that. But yes, if we can successfully move you from, say, New York or California to Texas or Florida or another state that has zero tax, and I'm not talking just a paper move, I'm talking a real move, change your driver's license, your primary residence, your voter registration, your electricity bill, your gym membership, all of these, 101 subjective ties. If we start moving those over, we cut them from New York, we move you down to Florida, we get you accepted as a tax resident there. Then we move you overseas. Then we can make sure that we're not going to be owing state taxes, because there are stories of people going from specifically California. California is the most aggressive with this, but going directly from California to overseas, we can take care of the federal tax with a couple of other different programs directly from the IRS, but the state tax can still follow you. So that's why we do this 1-2 jump. Now, if you still have a primary residence back in one of these states, then that can be problematic. So, as I said, California is the most aggressive with this. So what I would really do is get rid of your primary residence as a first starting point, and then from there, I would buy a new home or a rental agreement or rental contract in one of the zero state taxes, and really get it accepted before making that other jump, because these states are, in a lot of cases, quite bankrupt, and they need a lot of extra money. So they're very much coming after people for these things.
Okay. So just in summary, it does sound like number one, sell your primary home, whatever state you're in. B, really move, like legit move into like the Florida, the Texas, or maybe the Puerto Rico, right? Rent and or buy a place there and establish it as your primary. Voter registration, gym membership, all of the above. I mean, that's a legit move. And then, that following year, move overseas, and then that should eliminate the state income tax. Is that a fair summary?
That is
from that
fair
previous
summary.
State that you were in before.
Correct.
Good.
And
now let's talk about federal. Now. Let's walk. Okay, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So with the federal side of things, there's a couple of tools in the toolbox, but there's not a whole lot. I'll kind of run through them. quickly and just to kind of give you a bit of context. So the first tool in the toolbox that we like to use is called the Foreign Earned Income Exclusion, the FEIE, which allows you, as of this date, to exclude the first $126,500. You still file taxes based on your entire amount, but you're not subject to taxation on that first $126,500. Now, the nice thing is that if your spouse is also a U.S. tax person, then it's a doubling effect. So now you're looking at just over $250,000 where you're not subject to taxation. Now, a couple of caveats, all right? You have to qualify for this. So there's two qualifying. There's either the physical presence test or the bona fide residency test. I like to do the physical presence test year one because it is math. It's very, very simple. It's 330 days in a foreign country, all right? Now, this can be over any 12-month period. After we get accepted for this and we filed and it's all going through, then year two, year three onwards, I like to do the bona fide residency test. Bona fide residency test is the same type of ties that we had to do to move you from, New York to Florida or from California to Texas or whatever it might be. We're going to do the same kind of things overseas. So we're going to have a gym membership and your golf club membership and your driver's license, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we're going to have a residency, so the legal right to live and work in that country. Now, this is going to allow you to spend a little bit more time in the United States every year. So instead of 330 days, let's say 365 days in a year, potentially 30 some odd days back in the US, now you could spend, maybe 60 days, maybe 80 days, It's a little bit more subjective. This doesn't mean go back and start having board meetings or signing corporate documents or anything like that back in the US. But if you want to go on vacation, it's a little bit more flexible. The other big important qualifier is that it must be earned income. So we're not talking about passive investments. We're not talking about dividend distributions or capital gains. We're specifically referring to earned income. Now, if you are a professional trader or a professional real estate investor, then there are ways that we can classify you as such and potentially take that, that type of income and turn it into an earned income opposed to a passive source. Make sense?
Oh, it makes perfect sense. Thank you. By the way, people can learn more about Mikkel, Mikkel, Thor, like the movie Thor, and then UP at going to expatmoney.com. It's expatmoney.com. So Mikkel, let's keep going on this line here. Okay. So let's do like a case study, right? So Mr. and Mrs. Smith, they live in California. They make $2.5 million per year. Their net worth is about $25 million. And they've always dreamed of going overseas, all right? And so they're like, I've always wanted to live in Europe or wanted to live in, a certain place that, is very tax efficient, but also give me a chance to travel and flexibility. So it sounds like maybe the roadmap maybe be to stop in Puerto Rico. Let's give them the perfect roadmap here, okay? For a year, establish residency, right? Sell their primary home in Palo Alto. And now they're in Puerto Rico for a year, right? And then the following year, move over to a place that you're going to mention on the top, maybe 3 or 4 places that are maybe you might consider. Walk us through the steps and kind of fill in any of the gaps.
Yeah. So, with Puerto Rico, there's one program called Act 60. It used to be Act 20, Act 22. I don't really deal with it because it's not really an expat. Puerto Rico is still part of the United States, so I don't really deal with this piece. Hey, I cut out for a second there. Are you back?
Yeah, I don't know how much you heard on the question, but I was just saying that a couple of
questions. I just started to reply, and then as soon as I started replying, it cut out. So
okay,
I'll
good.
Jump back.
We'll edit it, but go ahead. Just jump right into the answer. Yeah.
Sure. So on Puerto Rico, there's actually something called Act 60. It used to be Act 20, Act 22. I actually don't deal with Puerto Rico at all because it's not really an expat. We can kind of get into what is an expat, what is not an expat. lexicon, terminology, all these types of things. I also think that it's probably not going to last. I don't know how long it will be here, but it's my guess is it's not going to be here for a long period of time. So therefore, I'm looking for more permanent solutions. But let's modify it a little bit, and let's say they're going from California to Florida, which is something we typically see. We see this every single day, all right? So we're going to get rid of their state income tax, as we've outlined already. Then we want to move them overseas. Now, you said something about, a dream of living in Europe in a tax-favorable jurisdiction. That doesn't really exist anymore. I mean, Europe is not known as a tax-favorable place. There might be a couple of places, we could look at Malta or, Luxembourg, things like this. But in most cases, you're not going to get a residency for those countries anyways. So that will be a little bit more difficult. Where we're finding a lot of the freedom from taxation is more in the Caribbean or in Latin America. So what we like to do is pick what's called a territorial tax country. This is a country that does not tax foreign-sourced income. So for example, I'm in Panama City, Panama right now. Panama only taxes on locally sourced income. So if you generate your money overseas, there is no tax here in Panama, even if you live in Panama full-time. So a very, very classic territorial tax system country. Other countries that would fall into this would be places like Belize, Costa Rica, Paraguay. These types of countries all tax only on locally sourced income. So this is a very good opportunity of picking a jurisdiction. Now, as we outlined in the foreign earned income exclusion, they have, an exclusion of roughly $250,000, which is not going to really do us too much in your example where, we're talking, $2 million or $2.5 million in annual income. So we have to start looking at some other strategies in this. The really big strategy for Americans, and this is not a recommendation, I'm not advising anyone today, I'm just talking in general terms, but what some people do is they actually renounce their U.S. citizenship. This is the only surefire way to absolutely be done with the IRS forever. Now, it's a very serious commitment, and I'm not, once again, recommending it. I'm just telling you that it is possible and that people are doing it all over the world. Now, there's difficulty with this because there's a difference between what's called a covered expatriate and a non-covered expatriate, and it has to do with a net worth, or there can be other qualifiers like your average income. So in your example, these people would be considered a covered expatriate, and they would owe an exit tax, which is basically a deemed disposition of everything they own on the day, and they would pay a capital gains tax on that to be able to get out. But going forward, after they have paid this tax, then they would no longer be tax residents to the IRS ever again, as long as, not doing, U.S. business or U.S., things that are going to trigger or you start living in the U.S. again, let's say for physical presence test or things like that. But let's say they really are moving overseas as your example. Then you would only be a tax resident of your new tax home country. And in this example, if it's Costa Rica or Panama or wherever it might be, you would only be subject to tax on locally sourced income. So don't go and start getting a bartending job or start, opening a tienda or a store or, things like this that would be considered. But anything online, any type of international business, any stock portfolio, things like this, you shouldn't have any trouble at that point.
Okay, we're speaking with Mikkel Thorup, everybody, expatmoney.com, expatmoney.com. Let's move into estate tax, okay? So one of the biggest challenges is what I think is one of the elephant in the room for ultra high net worth individuals. It's now 30 million married, 15 million single with the big, beautiful tax bill that was passed. And that, but if you're a patriot and your net worth is inside of the U.S., basically this means that the first 30 million, if you're married, is exempt from the death tax, the estate tax. So let's say you're worth 130 million as an example. The first 30 million you're married is exempt, but that other 100 million will be hit with a 40% death tax, okay? So inside of the taxable estate. So what you want to know, is inside or outside the taxable estate? Now, if I give up my citizenship, my understanding, Mikkel, is that if you're a non-U.S. citizen and your wealth is in the U.S., you have about a $68,000 exemption. So that same
correct,
130 million is basically taxed at the full 40%, which is brutal, by the way. And so the big thing is, how do we get the capital, the equity outside of the taxable estate? I want you to walk me through. I live in Palo Alto again. I'm a tech entrepreneur who started like a really cool company that exploded. My net worth is 130 million. I'm married, right? But I'm like, gosh, I got to get this estate in order or outside the taxable estate, because we're going to get crushed. What strategies do you have? And then I'll suggest one too.
So to be clear, I am not a U.S. tax lawyer or U.S. estate tax lawyer at all. This is, okay, I've read through the laws for estate tax. They're probably some of the most brutal laws I've ever read in my entire life. These things are so incredibly aggressive. There are not a lot of options. Like I said at the beginning of our conversation, Americans have a rough deal with all of these. The normal strategies that people are looking for are grantor trusts, which can be very tricky, and you're going to have to work with a lawyer who's going to be taking on some pretty serious liability for these, for making an opinion letter. That would be number one. Then we'd be looking at intellectual property, what we're able to move around, how we're going to use, restrictive covenants and things like that, and kind of depress the value of all of these assets. But you're right, the exemption for non-Americans with U.S. taxes are extremely low, like basically nothing, 60 some odd $1,000 opposed to $30 million. That's a huge difference. And we do deal with this on a regular basis. And I do have an estate tax lawyer that I work alongside who specializes in these types of things. But once again, very, very aggressive laws out there towards this.
Yeah, I gotcha. I'm going to offer some suggestions here and a thought and strategy. So for those who don't know, I'm founder of Capital Gains Tax Solutions. This is what we build. We build a capital gains tax exit plans for U.S. and non-U.S. citizens, but for U.S. assets, and then build estate tax plans for also whether you're U.S. citizen or not, but you have U.S. subject estate tax. And so the big challenge with a lot of these old strategies, Mikkel, like these grantor trusts and different things, a lot of it's like gifting or skipping to the next generation. And like some of these do work on, and they do work, but it's just, they're very, let's call it inefficient, take a while to get everything kind of going and up and running. We have a strategy that's really unique. Like, let's say that same Palo Alto, tech millionaire, tech, 100 millionaire, he's selling his company for 130 million, to keep it really simple, right? We, in one day on a sale, can sell to a trust that forever eliminates the estate tax. Okay. Now, let me give you some of the key things here, right? You need to have an actual third-party buyer that has 130 million. So let's say it's Apple, and Apple's gobbling up this company for 130 million, right? And Apple's like, we're going to buy it. And so that's a third-party buyer's Apple. The seller is the seller, 130 million, right? And the way that we structure it without any life insurance gifting, none of the lifetime exemptions given up, or charity required, they sell the company. But before they sell it to Apple, we actually sell it to a trust first, and then they sell it to Apple. So it's like a three-party sale, right? And the U.S. tax code that we use, the way we use it, allows for a repayment back to the original buyer, the original seller, right? And they become basically like a lender, if you will. They become the bank. And that's kind of in short here. They only pay taxes, they receive payments back from that. But this 130 million, Mikkel, is forever outside of the taxable estate. And let's say that grows to $1 billion over their lifetime, because they're 35 or 40 years old. They're this tech, genius that made this newest AI, company, right? Well, this is the cool thing, right? It's forever outside the taxable estate on the 130 plus all of the growth of it. One of the biggest deals that was done with this was a $120+ million deal in San Diego, California. Been audited, no change, no findings, all of these things. And so I mentioned this to everyone who's listening, because if you don't have a good team in place and a good strategy to actually get to the root cause of it, you're going to get crushed with the tax. If you want to learn more, you can go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. It's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Mikkel, I'm curious, have you heard anything like that before? And what are your thoughts on it?
I mean, I'm not a domestic tax planner at all, but I mean, anytime that we're able to legally reduce taxes, I am very, very fond of this. And of course, if this is a proven strategy and you have the laws that back it up, I'm very curious to learn more myself. And I definitely parrot what you said. Working with a professional and a professional team is extremely important. These are not things where you want to cut corners on. You want to work with brain surgeons on these types of things.
Right, I couldn't say that more. By the way, this is so key, right? My business partner, tax attorney, CPA, thousands of transactions. He was a former M&A attorney for Arthur Andersen. He's a genius. I think he's the Elon Musk of this world, right? He's no one. I don't know anyone who's done more transactions than him in the last 30 years. And he's my business partner. And we do all these deals together. But here's the key. He always says this really well. He says every single estate tax, capital gains tax, and tax strategy works. Every single one of them. Until you get audited, okay? And so that is the key, right? What is the audit track record of the strategy that you're looking at? Number one is what you should always ask of anyone who brings you a tax strategy. Number two, who has defended those on audits? How many audits, right? Is there lifetime audit defense built in? How many years have they been doing this for, right? Is there a private letter ruling? Has there been any IRS court cases? I mean, you just keep going down, digging. Now, that's the key for me to give me certainty of conviction. Mikkel, what else would you add when you're vetting, attorneys that are saying that they have this, amazing exit strategy or this amazing tax strategy? Are there any other questions that you're asking besides those ones?
No, I think those are extremely important ones. I mean, I'm definitely looking at track record. For example, the person who does all our U.S. renunciation has renounced roughly 6,000 people. So they do about 20% of all renunciations on planet Earth every single year. They've been doing this for many years. I don't know anybody who's done more of these types of transactions. And they've been audited, I believe, twice out of 6,000 successful renunciations, and there were very particular reasons for the audits on those. So I think that your statements are very bang on, and I would definitely be very careful about tax strategies that are put into place. Like the ones that I'm talking about are very easy. We can go and look them up on the IRS website. You can go and look up FEIE and things like this, or Act 60, or other types of programs. I stay away from dirty dozen type of stuff, or these multi-pension plans and these other types of things that you might read about. It's not the work that I do. Let's just leave it at that.
Yeah. By the way, ours also has never been on the dirty dozen, never been on an IRS watch list, right? It's been over 30 audits, all no change, no findings. Also really important that the strategy you're doing aren't the audit triggers, right? So we've never had a trigger on an audit. They just happen to be large cases, large business sales, large real estate sales, and that actual case itself is what was audited, okay? And then during the audit, or that particular client was audited, during the audit, they found our strategy and they dug into that. And so then the strategy was audited. And so again, if you want to learn more about that, go to capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. That's capitalgainstaxsolutions.com. Mikkel, if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best place to find you?
Yeah, so very happy to discuss these types of things. I mean, my work is more focused on the offshore strategies, which we kind of outlined very briefly, but kind of the other side of the puzzle. So I usually work with the specialists inside the U.S., and then I'm dealing with the taxes in the foreign country. We help with a lot of the movement of the money, of the restructuring of things overseas, and then all of the immigration work to actually get you in that country. So the residency, the citizenship, all of these types of things, helping select the jurisdiction and then how it's being viewed. So I'm very much a team player. We work with the local partners and trusted people, and we have kind of our small niche that we work with in the expat space. But, very happy to help your audience. If you guys reach out to us at expatmoney.com, we've been doing this for a very long time and have a very good success record. So happy to help your people.
Awesome, Mikkel. Thank you for being on the show. And I also want to thank all of our listeners for listening to another episode of the Build to Billions podcast, also streaming on Capital Gains Solutions Podcast. I want to encourage you to take action today and get with Mikkel on expatmoney.com or with me at capitalgainstaxsolution.com. And we'll talk to you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Bye.